In this milestone 100th episode of Gold Shields, we are joined by Taya Kyle, widow of U.S. Navy SEAL Chris Kyle. Taya is a powerful voice for military families and veterans, and today she shares her journey of love, loss, and faith, and how she has carried on her husband's incredible legacy as depicted in the film American Sniper. We reflect on the meaning of sacrifice, the unwavering respect of our military heroes, and the importance of faith in God during times of hardship. This episode is a testament to the resilience of the human spirit and the unbreakable bond between service members, their families, and the nation they protect. Join us for a conversation that will inspire, uplift, and remind us all of the true cost of freedom. Gold Shields brings true stories from law enforcement, the military, true crime authors, and first responders. Experience the dedication, danger, and emotional toll with the heroes themselves. These gripping tales of true crimes, true stories, and true heroes are all here on Gold Shields. And welcome back to Gold Shields. This is Dan Murphy, along with my partner in crime, Tom Smith.
What's up, buddy? How are you?
I'm excited about this show, and I know you are too, and we're very, very honored to have our guest today, and I'm going to let you tell our audience all about her.
Yeah, you know what? This is first of all, this is our last show of the season. That's going to be out, and we specifically made this the last show of the year. This was planned actually a couple of months ago, and I talked to her and just said we're gonna record it because it's gonna be the last show of the year. And I don't know if we could have picked someone better. And I don't mean that to downgrade any guests we've had, but when I explain this, you'll get it. We have Taya Kyle on today. And anyone who knows anything about anything knows who Taya Kyle is. Wife of Chris Kyle, American Sniper movie, and all that. But this story goes way beyond just a movie, just a book, just the marriage of two people, and a tragic end to that. It goes way beyond that. And that's what we're going to talk about today. Obviously, what we're going to talk about, with Chris and everything. But there's a lot more to this, and there's a lot more to this story. And we are so beyond honored. In our English language, we have words that we can't go further than honored, privileged. So that's what we got, Taya. And we are honored and privileged to have you on Gold Shields. Thank you so much for being here.
Well, thank you for having me. I really have a lot of respect for the work that you all do have done. You've put in such a long fight during your lifetime in so many different ways for our country and our communities. And I think what you all have been involved in is something few people really understand. And it's important that you talk about it. It's important that people understand. And I know for a fact that Chris would be very honored to be here in person, and I just got chills, which is interesting because I don't usually when I said that, but, like, that was painted by a friend of mine, and, we were supposed to auction it, somebody got it for me, and I feel like his eyes kinda move in that one, and so it's giving me chills, so I'm like, this is the first time I've done a podcast with that background because this is, like, a new barn office for us, and, so I'm like, "Oh, he kinda is here, kinda is, like, right here, you're wearing" so, Dan, you're the only one not wearing a ball cap in this, it's Chris, Tom, me.
I could put one on, but who would want to cover up this ridiculously bizarre hairstyle of nothingness said that I have? But
No, I thought you were gonna say something like, give yourself some props, this is too good to cover up, the ladies like this, no? Okay, okay.
no, I roll the other way. Here's the way I roll. I have a head like a beach ball. You put a hat on a beach ball, it just makes it look bigger. So we don't wear too many hats in my head. Yeah,
Yeah,
just
well, then you gotta know it looks good. Chris said 90% of being cool is looking cool, and so if it looks like a beach ball, you can't do it.
no, you can't. Oh my god, we're off to a start. I can see this is gonna be fun. Taya, most of our audience has a great reverence for the military and for law enforcement, and if they're not members themselves, they enjoy a peek into that world, and we've had some great guests given that. But
You know, your husband's book, your own book, the movie, a lot has been put out there, but if you could, just tell us a little about yourself and how you crossed paths with Chris Kyle.
That's it, yeah. I'm happy to. It's a kind of been an interesting road. I just got done yesterday speaking to an audience where I used pictures for the first time. And so I kind of went through my life and it's very fresh in my mind after having looked at those pictures, just kind of from childhood to meeting Chris. And I was definitely kind of came out of the bloom a tomboy, hard charging, full of life. And maybe not the easiest kid to raise because of that, right? They're great qualities to have when you're older, with being stubborn or hard headed or hard charging, but to raise that is difficult. So I definitely had my difficulties, and it really starts with faith for me. When I was a little girl, I felt Jesus and God so strongly, and then I just didn't want to go to church as a young teen, and I really didn't understand how to keep that relationship with Jesus. I knew about praying, but I really wasn't into the Bible. I thought it was a set of rules, uh, which my dad one time explained to me, which I thought was so cool. So I'm going to share it with you. But I said, I don't really understand. It's like a book of rules, and you're forgiven for anything anyway. So kind of what's the point, right? That was my thought at the time. And he said, well, Taya, the Bible is really a recipe for happiness. And it's changed over the years how I see it. I see it as a recipe for happiness, and I also see it as a love letter. Like a parent who knows they're dying would wanna write everything they could to their kid about, "If I'm not here to talk to you and have a cup of coffee with you, here it is. Here's everything I want you to know. If you wanna take it, this is wisdom," right? And I think that's what God did in the Bible. So, um, I say all of this because I wanna lead up to this point where I wasn't there, and I got my degree in college in Wisconsin, economics and business, and, a lot of broken parts and pieces over the years that just for a lot of different reasons and a lot of, different things. And then I moved to Southern California where my mom grew up and we had family and I spent my summers there. I was originally from Oregon. And so it was West Coast again. And I was going to live this whole kind of that Sex in the City life without the sex, right? It was just gonna be like, "Yeah, baby, I'm in Southern California, Los Angeles, I got a job, I got a condo," I'm and it was nothing like that. It was not at all what I thought in so many ways, and I still was determined to just kinda not need a man and figure it out and have fun, and I felt like after a while, I was beating my head against the wall. Things just weren't working the way that I thought, and I said, there was the first time I remember feeling like, I think God's actually telling me something. And I heard, "You're not meant to go this road alone." And I was like, I don't know. I feel like that could have been God, but how do I actually know? It could have just been me hearing something or making something up. I feel like until you really get deep and have enough experiences, you're never quite sure, right? It takes some convincing. And so I kind of kept doing my own thing. And then I thought I heard it again that you're not meant to go this road alone. It was very gentle, but it was kind of in my moments of frustration. I feel like I'd hear it. And then one time I was like, yeah, I'm pretty sure that's God, but I don't really want to do that. So I'm going to keep doing what I'm doing? And then it was like the last time I heard it, I was really defeated, honestly. Like I was really kind of feeling like this life was kind of kicking my butt in ways that I was feeling depressed for the first time in my life. Really, I was like, I don't understand. And so I prayed a prayer of submission, and I'd never done it before like this, but I just said, "God, okay, if that's what you want, then you pick. You pick the person. I don't care what he looks like. I don't care what he does for a living." Uh, which, I guess you should be specific. I don't care, how old he is. I don't care. You pick. Just make someone with a good heart. Someone nice is what I said. But I felt it more than I said it. So when I said nice, I meant like good, solid character, somebody just good. I'm done with all the mess. And and it was a very emotional prayer for me because submission wasn't something I really wanted to do at the time. I had no idea the power in it. And so I was just like a couple months later, I was living in Long Beach, California at the time. And I went with a friend down to San Diego. Kind of I was tired. I didn't want to go. She's like, no, we're going. My mom was there. And then we were at church or a bar, and, they drink scotch, so definitely a bar. So, like, God's everywhere, right? I mean, uh, and this one bar was playing a song that It was downtown San Diego, and it was a childhood favorite of mine, and I could not believe that it was playing, and I was like, "What the heck is that doing?" So, we ended up going into that bar, and that's where I met Chris, you know, I think to myself, when I prayed that prayer to God, I would liken that to asking my mom for something healthy to eat, and she would give me steamed broccoli, which I don't like, but I know that it has good value, so I know I should eat it, but, and so that's really when I prayed to God, that's part of the sadness is I was just like, "Okay, I'll have what's good for me, and it's probably not gonna be probably gonna be steamed broccoli," but, here's God showing off like he always does, blowing my mind, and he's like, "That's an ice cream sundae. Like, let me show you what I got for you." And I, in no way, shape, or form would have thought that Chris was the answer to prayer. He was young, he was hot. There was like no thought in my mind that this was the answer to prayer. I was a little belligerent. Um, and the movie is accurate in that I was by the end of the night vomiting and he was holding my hair back. But he was so really from the time I met him, I'm like, I just knew something was different about him. Very magnetic, easygoing, sincere. I told him what I thought when I finally got it out of him what he did for a living. Because at first I asked him and he told me that he said, "Do you know we're in San Diego?" And he said that in San Diego, the dolphins in captivity, they lose their natural ability to produce the wax that protects their skin. So I'm a dolphin waxer. I was like, I do not think you are that.
Oh, that's classic. That is classic.
Yeah, he told me, he said, "No, okay, fine. I work for the bank and there's like an ATM, money machine on the corner." He said, "The next time you're there, you're getting out money, just wave at me because I'm the guy on the camera handing out the money, like behind the camera handing out the money." And I'm like, "Dude, what do you do?" I said, "You're obviously not from around here, you got a clean cut hair, and he said, "Oh, I just graduated buds." And I was like, "Oh, okay." I said, "So I know about you then. Mind you, forgive me, give me grace here, but this is what I thought." I said, "So you're arrogant, self-centered, glory-seeking, egotistical kinda guy, huh?" And he was like he just said really calmly, he said, "I would die for my country. I don't see how that's egocentric or glory-seeking." And then I was like, "Oh, crap," right? I felt about this big, I'm like, "This guy's the real deal." Um, and most of the guys who really are the real deal, you'll never hear from. They're just cool as hell. Um, I'm just gonna say this because I feel like I can, but many of the SEALs you see in the public eye are douchebags, and most of the guys that know them think that, and I'm sorry to say it, it's true. I give an exception. I absolutely adore Marcus Luttrell and David Goggins are top-notch dudes. Um, that's all I'll say on that, but I think, the people that you see in the public are exactly what I thought that night. The people like Chris who intended to be quiet and behind the scenes, the humble warriors, those are the guys I know. Those are the friends of Chris's that were true friends. Um and you'll never hear from him. So anyway, that's what I saw in Chris. And I just went, wow, this guy's cool. Other thing that I loved about him was it got a little like a rowdy in the bar and somebody was kind of doing something that I didn't like with the girlfriend of mine who I went with. And I thought, this guy's going to show off me and Chris. He's probably going to like come up and, like, hey, don't mess. And so I kind of looked back a little nervous and he was just leaning against the bar stool and he said, "You good?" And I said, "Yeah." And he's like, "Okay, I'm here if you need me." And I was like, "That is so freaking awesome." Like, I already know that he just graduated from Bud, so I know he's a SEAL. I know he's got skills. And I love that he was just calm. Like, I don't have to show anything or prove anything. If you're good, I'm good. But I know, I'm watching. And so let me know. So, um, so then with the bar got kind of crowded and it was time to go and people were kind of pushing and I kind of got pushed up against him and he didn't wanna go out that night either, which is so God to just say 2 people who don't wanna go out are going to meet tonight? Um, and I got pushed into him, I felt these, like, solid abs under this, like, baggy sweatshirt that he had now, and he smelled so good, and so, I just kissed him on the neck, and I remember looking back in his eyes, it just got kinda, like, happy and, like, "Oh, hey," and so then he was like, "You wanna go get a cup of coffee or something?" I said, "Sure," and so we walk out and, And he grabbed a kiss on the stairs on the way out, and then we get to the top and the cold air hits me. I'm like, "Oh, I don't feel good." Like, everything started to hit, and he's like, "You alright?" And I said, "I don't think I can get coffee." It's just I could. And so he and his friend walked us to the parking garage, and, as soon as I saw the car where my friend who was not drinking was driving, and I just started vomiting, and I remember he just came and held my hair back so gently and, like, rubbed my back, and, "Are you okay?" And I've known this guy for what, Like, not long at all, um, and then he got me buckled in the car, said, "Do you need us to drive and you follow to wherever you need to go, or you know where you're going?" Whatever. We get there, and then, my mom is there to take care of me. I vomit my brains out, and it was just awful, and then he calls the next morning right away. No games, no bravado, just, "Hi, I wanted to check in on you, how are you feeling?" And had the great laugh, and, um, I could go on and on about him, but there were so many things that were so special and unique about him that it was just impossible not to just fall in love with him. I mean, it surprised me. He had no, he had no what I don't know what you would call reservations. He could be as vulnerable. "Call me, do can you go out tonight?" He thought I lived in San Diego. He didn't know I lived in Long Beach. So he's like, "Can you go out tonight?" I said, "No, I got work tomorrow." "And can you go out tonight?" "No, I got work tomorrow." I'm like, "I can't drive 3 hours." So finally, we see each other, and this is just for a brief bit before he went to jump school, and we ended up just we went out to the pier, and grabbed some calamari and talked, and he was just such a kind. He didn't even try to kiss me that day. Like, we were leaving, and I thought, "Oh, here, this you'll relate to." I was wearing a long jean skirt that went, like, down to kind of it's from my ankles, but it has slit up to the upper thigh, right? So it's kind of fitted, but and I said, you were always such a gentleman. I remember wearing that skirt and thought, you're the only guy I know who's not trying to sneak a look at my leg?" And he said, I was wearing sunglasses that day, and I said, "Yeah." And he goes, "Every time you'd look away, I'd look down, and I was like, "Okay, well, you're really slick." 'Cause I did not catch that at all, but that just made me laugh. And that was only much later that I figured that out. But I was leaving that day, and I thought, "Yeah, I'm gonna leave, and this guy's not even gonna kiss me." And oh, now I want to. He's so kind, and so I had got up on my toes, and I remember giving him just a sweet, soft, like just lip, like a gentle kiss, and I pulled back, and his eyes were closed, and he was just so content with that, and it took him a second to open his eyes, and it made me just it made me nervous because I thought he's so special and different, and, he just had a way of being in the moment and just appreciating it and not needing more from me, just being literally, delighted in whatever I came to the table with? Um, and you just can't, I mean, we were in our 20s, our mid-20s, and we were living on our own, and it I just could not. I mean, I ran to the car because I was so nervous. I'm like, "Oh my god, this guy is so," and I'm like, "I have to get out of here because it was so sweet and so nice." Um, and then he went to jump school, and we talked all the time, um, and he would do things. Maybe he would drive all night just to come spend a few hours with me and then go back to work because he had that freeway thing, and, from San Diego to Long Beach was hours in traffic, and he would call to just he would say, "I just called to tell you I'm madly in love with you. That's it." And I was like, "Oh my gosh, you did? Yeah." Or, "Can I tell you one more story about him and then I'll stop on all this stuff?" But
You can talk
okay,
all night about Chris Kyle.
okay. I mean, I'll probably end up crying on this one, but he was so good at, pursuing, and I wasn't gonna call him. I was gonna let him call me? And, I remember my aunt died, and I called and I said, I just wanted to talk to you." Um, and so it was the first time I called him, and he said, I remember I said, "My aunt died," and he said, "Well, how do you feel about that?" And I thought, "What a unique question." Most people would just say, "I'm sorry," to hear it, and they would just assume how you feel. But to me, that was so unique to say, "Well, how do you feel about that? How are you doing?" And, um, so we talked that night, and then we got off the phone, and the next day, he calls, and he says, "I gotta tell you, the guys have been giving me hell. They've been saying, 'She's never gonna call you, bro. You've been calling this girl. She's up there. She's not even coming down here, giving him hell.'" And he said, "So when you called me, after we hung up the phone, I went in and jumped on their beds and said, 'Taya called, Taya called. I told you she'd call.'" And I'm thinking, here's a guy in his 20s who's, super hot, um, cowboy, SEAL, fit, and is not putting on any pretenses. Like he's telling me that he just jumped on the bed with those guys, not 5 years from now, literally the day after, telling me how excited he was. And it just really moved me. I just thought this guy is so quietly confident, never asking for more, but just like I said, delighted with whatever I could offer. And he just kept surprising me in that way. I spoke about it at his funeral, but I remember telling him, I'm always happy when I'm with you, but my life was not easy when I met you. It was starting to get really dark. And for the first time in my life, I was actually depressed. And I didn't know that much about depression at the time. So I thought when I was telling him this was going to be a huge deal and maybe somebody wouldn't want to be with me because now I was actually suffering from a depression where I didn't want to leave the house. I did because I worked, but I would put it off to the last minute and leave the blinds closed. And that was just wasn't me. And so I thought he should know what he was getting into. And I just said, I think I actually have to take medication and I don't really want you to feel like you have to be, you should know, like, this is the whole deal. And so maybe even though I'm with you here, I've got this and you might not want to go this deeper with me. And I just remember he grabbed my hand and I mean, I think we'd only been dating maybe 2 months, 3. And he said, you're a package deal, man. And I love you. And I was just like, it's that simple to him. You know, there's nothing more complex. It's just so simple. And then I said, well, I have to take some medication starting next week. And they said it could make me tired or I don't know how I feel. And so maybe I won't spend the weekend next weekend. He said, "Oh, no, just come down. I'll take care of you. Just come down and hang out with me. We don't have to do anything." So I came down that weekend and I was nervous to take medication. And, there's nothing wrong with all this stuff, by the way. But at the time I didn't know that. Um, and so I arrived and he said, um, "Hey, get in the car. I want to take you somewhere." He drives from downtown, which is where he had an apartment, to Old Town San Diego. He found a little boutique kind of bed and breakfasty place, not bed and breakfast, but a boutique hotel. And he opens the door and said, "What are you doing?" And he goes, "Just wait." He opens the door. There's 2 dozen long stem pink roses on the middle of a table in the living room, and there's an attached bedroom. And he said, "I got this so that you could sleep as much as you want. I'll be in the living room watching TV so you can have your space, or I'll come in here. We can sit the whole weekend with me doing that. I just want you to have the time and space to do whatever you need." And he said, "I've got dinner reservations if you want them, but there's no obligation to go. I got us tickets to a comedy, like a live comedy play, if you want to go, but there's no obligation." And I just thought, he's just so kind, like really just so um, thoughtful. And I was, like I said, a little hot-headed, and I had a little bit of a temper, and I was the one doing that, not him. He'd come up and put his hand on my back and like, "Is there anything I can do to make this better?" And it was just, so beautiful. And I think I feel tearful about it today because I'm so aware of what war does, right? And how he was still that good of a guy in the end, and he was still romantic, and he was still kind, and yet there's so much more than is in the book or the movie, right? That's what the Navy would let him say. It's not even close to the full story. And at the time, I just thought we're solid and we're good. I sometimes think, I wonder what that would have been like to have that, Chris and Taya, for the long term. And by the grace of God, we figured it out, as much as we could. And I look at it now and go, well, you get 7 years of marriage credit for every 1 year in a service marriage. It's like if you've been married 10 years, it's like 70, right? Law enforcement, military, whatever. Because you get to see and experience so much more. Your friends are dying, you're sick, you experience, all the things that you experience in a lifetime are compressed. And so the beauty is that I really would never have to wonder. I wonder if Chris and I would have loved each other through everything. So I feel like shit, we did. Like I think I saw him in every stage and every emotion and every hardship that people experience in life. From his knees wearing out and knee replacements that you might have at 50 or 60 or 80, to friends dying to, PTS and raising kids and all that. So, he's just an incredible human being. And with that, we had a lot of hard times in the middle. trying to figure out what the hell was going on. Like, what's happened? It doesn't feel like it should. I never felt like it should impact a marriage the way that it does. And now we have a whole foundation set up to serve people who are married in service marriages because not it's not as bad as you think if you just have the right tools. But we didn't have them. Nobody had them.
Uh,
So Dan, that was what 20 minutes for one question. Go ahead. Yeah, one more.
No, 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 that was amazing. Tom, go ahead, please.
yeah. I mean, that's incredible. It's an incredible story, and that's kind of what I said in the beginning of this. There's so much more than what anybody sees on TV or the movies or read in a book that we wanted to do. And the only question I had, I mean, that popped into my head, Taya, was, you went to him and asked him if he had any reservations because of what you were going through. But yet, you had to, in your life, deal with kind of this other guy who had this other life of being a SEAL. That's not like being a milkman. I mean, you know, so was there ever a point during what you were going through and then turn and go, "Holy crap, can I do this? Because I know what he is, I know what he's doing, and I know what they do." How were you with getting in his life? Like, you were concerned with him getting in yours. How were you to get in his life?
That's a great question, and it's funny. I'm glad you asked it because there was nothing that bothered me ever about what he did as far as violence or whatever. And I know when he came back, there were times that he would sort of test the waters on some things again that never did share publicly, but maybe with a couple friends or maybe with a couple beers. And he would think that if people knew, they would think, he was a monster or something. I'm like, no, no, this is war. This is what happens. You survive is what you're supposed to do. And you're supposed to make sure the people you're with survive. And when it gets ugly with people who are truly doing acts of evil, what else can you do, right? So to me, there was nothing that he could have th to me, that's what it was. Now, I appreciate his concern because and your question, because we told a couple of people who were close to us, not we, maybe Chris, with the drink, and me one time with somebody, and they freaked out, right? They were both women, and they both had a really hard time. One of them, reacted poorly, and on the drive home, they had a 2-hour drive home, and the husband she called after the 2-hour drive and said, "I'm so sorry, my husband just reamed me the whole way home," of like, "You have no freaking clue what you just said or thought or did, like, you gotta, imagine what this is like, um, and what had to be done and stuff." So she got it. The other person was close to me and never really did get it, and I just thought, "Well, that's fine, I just won't talk about that stuff," because, if you don't, um a friend of mine who has family in Israel was explaining it to some friends of hers, and she said, "You've gotta think of it like this," because their point was they thought Israel was being too aggressive, whatever. I mean, they were kinda drinking some Kool-Aid, but she has family there, and she said, "I want you to picture that you move into a house, and you live there, it's your land and your house, and then somebody moves in next to you, and they start shooting at you. And you say, "I don't wanna do violence, but, you can't be shooting at me," and whatever, okay. Then they get some of their friends, and some of their friends move in next, and they're shooting at you, right? And now they're shooting at your kids, and now they're raping your kids, and now another person moved in, and you have let's just say you have nowhere else to go, right? So now they're shooting, raping, pillaging. At what point do you defend your family and say, "You don't get to do this to my daughter," right? And I don't know why it has to get so personal for people to understand that, but I feel like people today are not as good at making it personal. They think of it as this country to country thing and forgetting these are real humans doing real things that you're witnessing. I mean, the evil and violence that Chris saw against children. Um, I mean, your audience can handle this, but it is not uncommon. Chris is not the only one to have seen this. Many of the guys did, but some of the tribal leaders there, if they want to get back at another tribal leader, usually their grandparents, that by the time they're a leader, um, take their grandchild, sodomize them, burn their eyes with cigarettes so they can't identify them, and put them out in the desert to wander. That's not uncommon. That's 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 evil. I just that's evil, right? And that's just one of the many things. And so I think it just I don't think people understand it. But to answer your question, Tom, that did not ever bother me. In fact, what probably got to me more was and not in an aggressive way. I can tell you what I was aggressively not happy with. But this way was like, "You can tell me these things." He's like, "Well, I don't want you to worry because 'cause I'm going back." And I'm like, "You can't probably tell me anything that I couldn't already imagine in some level." Like, I couldn't imagine specifically that somebody would do that to a child, but I did know that some awful things were happening to children, right? And I did know, um, that there was no rhyme or reason for which guys would die on the battlefield and which wouldn't. You know, you couldn't predict it. Chris would go down an alleyway literally with bullets flying by to rescue somebody, and I've seen the write-ups for it, you know? I mean, he wasn't just on a sniper on a roof, kicking down doors, hand-to-hand combat, and he'd live. And then somebody else would go on their first op and maybe hit a mine that wasn't supposed to be there and blow up. You know, they're just um and so you know, he slowly over time I think started to tell me more. Tom, the part that was really hard for me was at the time that we were married, there was a 97% divorce rate in the SEAL teams and the enlisted guys. 97%. So he's surrounded by infidelity, by they go on training trips and they're drinking and they're doing whatever and or they come home and the wife is cheated, or they come home and they've signed the power of attorney, but the wife has taken all the money after deployment, or I mean, you name it, right? Or the things like, hey, no, they told us that we could be there so we can plan this for this date. And then, of course, you can't plan it, right? And it's so it's disappointment after disappointment and not wanting to blame him, but also being kind of mad. So, as you guys both well know, in the service life, the job becomes the mistress, right? She's the one that gets the attention. Even though you're the one doing the work, right? You're loving him for the long haul. She won't stay around until you know, if she's not getting what she needs anymore. But she's the where the excitement is, and she's where the draw is, and she's where the pull is. And it from a wife's perspective, she's the lie, right? She won't love you like I'll love you ever, right? Um, and then it's like he also has to drop, you know, the drop of a dime. To go do and then let down your family on your commitments, and no, you're not mad at him, right? But you're frustrated, and it's hard to mask that, and so we work on that with our couples too. And then you what do? Do you stop counting on him after a while? And how does that feel, right? Because a man wants to be reliable and counted on, and so it was there was those kind of dynamics, and then it was the dynamic of me feeling like he's such a good dad. Oh my god, such a good dad, and my friend, right? Like we laughed, and he was the youthful part, and the neighbors loved him. I mean, he's the reason we had friends in the neighborhood. I was like north, you guys know, right? Like I was a northwestern, keep my head down and go in my house, you know. And he's like, "Hey, since we're neighbors, we're friends," you know. Um, and so he introduced me to her. So he was just such a light in that way. And at some point I was like, these are becoming my memories with the kids. They're not our memories. And that hurts me to a level I wouldn't have thought. I see the grace of God in that he taught me over time how to manage and how to deal because one day I would need that. Right. I am the only memory keeper now. And so I had some training. Um, and uh you do your best to still connect on things, but the softness of him changed, I think, for a couple of reasons. Um, he was still the same person, but I think his defenses went up because mine were up too, right? So he's looking at me going, "Are you gonna stay? Because nobody stays in these marriages." And I'm saying, "Of course I'm gonna freaking stay. I promised you, I promised God, I'm not going anywhere," you know? But he's like, people say that." And so I'm getting frustrated, like, "Well, aren't you in this for the long, you know, haul?" Um, and he's assuming, and he told me years later, I could not believe this. He was like, "Well, when we got married, I didn't necessarily think it was gonna last." I'm like, "What the why would
Yeah.
you marry me with that?" You know? And he was like, "Well, I wanted to try. I was hoping it would." I'm like, "That's not the way you go into." So it blew my mind, you know, because here's this guy that's like unchanging, so good, so pure, you know, he loves God, loves the so for all of those reasons, I think we didn't know what we didn't know to communicate, right? And so we had some assumptions that weren't valid, and then, you know, we gosh, we struggled through it, and, um, I think, you know, I could look back, there was some I said some ugly things, you know, and I was mad as hell, and I wanted him to care, you know, more than I thought he was, which women don't know this a lot of times, but this warrior mindset, dude, we just think, oh, you're so tough. Well, freaking here. Why don't you take this until I see you care? And they care at the first second, right? You guys are like warriors on the job and you're badass, but your hearts are usually so good to do that kind of work and to love that deeply. So that's another thing I'm passionate about is helping women understand how we can wound a man with our tongue and we don't even know it, you know? Um, and so there are just so many things I learned that, and I'm so passionate about knowing it and helping other people know it so they can, have more of that time where it could have been, um, amazing. But we did get there and we got there pretty dang fast before he died, I would say, for the amount of time he was out of the military. And we help veterans with our TACAF too, because I thought Chris and I have a lot of fun when he's not at work too. So when he gets out, it's gonna be awesome. It's just gonna be that all the time. And I had no idea, nor did he, what a horrible transition it was. And these guys that were supposedly, gonna take a bullet for you and die for you are like gone, disappeared, and they have his friends have, not all of them, but, a couple of them that were like, "Yeah, I guess I just did. I got busy," or I thought, "Well, you left." So, because that's what they want you to think, right? The SEAL teams want you to think if you leave, you're a quitter. Um, it's and like I said, he had, one guy who's still serving and is amazing who, he had some that we kept in touch with and we go on vacation and see, but it was just different, right? And like he said, "You can't go in a civilian job. If these guys piss me off, I can't punch them in the face, have them punch me back, a handshake, and we're good." He's like, "This sucks." Um, so he had a lot of those things, but, yeah, he was just a phenomenally good dude who, by the way, this is another story just to know the behind the scenes, Chris. 2 of them. One was we had friends on the soccer field, a lot of them. That's how he knew Chad Littlefield. His daughter played soccer with our daughter, McKenna. Well, we're on the soccer field with our son, Colton, um, and Colton's little, and one of the friends that we'd made over a couple seasons was sitting down, and she goes, "So, we were at Barnes& and Noble the other day, and Jared, her husband, picks up a book, and your husband's on it." And I just kinda smiled, and she's like, "Okay, how come we didn't notice?" And I was like, "I don't know, just something we did." And that was where he was comfortable. Nobody had to know, right? And I loved that about him. And after he was killed, they barricaded off the street and there was like a tour bus for just meetings and people. And I mean, there was so much going on. I mean, I didn't arrange any of it. It was all happening. And so somebody was asking a kid down the street and they said, "So what is it like to have been, living next to American Sniper?" And he said, "I didn't know he was. I just knew he was a dad." And to me, that's everything. That's Chris. That is just um, he's just the coolest, right? And when the first time he had a book signing, there was a 3-hour line, which we were shocked, and it went all the way upstairs, down the stairs, whatever. And so they had a table and they said, "Sit," and he said, "No, no, ma'am, thank you." And of course he's in a camo jacket, right? And a baseball hat. And he said, I said, "Babe, don't you think you want to sit? It's gonna be a long night." And he was like, "No, I'm good." He said, "If they're gonna stand for me, I'm gonna stand for them." I'm just like, dude, he's so cool. He's just like such a good dude. Um, and my son has both my kids have a lot of his qualities. So I'm gonna plug my son right now, Colton Kyle Official on Instagram. And he's running the American Sniper brand. So americansniper.com. He's 20 years old, brilliant, decided to take a gap year. I was like, "Good, take the American Sniper brand because I've never done it justice." And so he's gonna have some new tactical stuff, and maybe you guys can talk to him one time too. But if you want to, I know he'd love to. But coming out in 2025, and so it's fun to see the goodness and the thought patterns and all that live on in the kids too.
When it comes to the safety of law enforcement, first responders, and military personnel, every moment counts, especially in the dark. Streamlight provides the reliable, high-performance lighting solutions that these heroes trust in the most dangerous situations, whether it's a car stop, navigating dark alleyways, or exploring abandoned buildings. With Streamlight by their side, our heroes can tackle challenges with confidence, knowing they have the power of advanced lighting technology to guide them. From the first responders on the front lines to the law enforcement officers ensuring our safety, Streamlight is there to make every mission a little easier and much safer. Join us in supporting those who protect us. Visit streamlight.com to discover how you can be part of the team keeping our heroes safe. Because when they shine, we all shine.
Looking for powerful defense without the mess? Meet Impact, a revolutionary line of chemical irritants designed for law enforcement, military, and personal protection. With no blowback, no cross-contamination, and easy cleanup, Carry Impact delivers unmatched stopping power without the hassle. Whether you're in the field or on the street, safety should never be compromised. Protect yourself with the next generation of defense. Carry Impact, stopping power redefined.
So Chris lives on in your children, he lives on in your heart, and he lives on in the hearts and minds of so many Americans who are so grateful for what he did. You know, you talked a little bit earlier, you mentioned about um, personal, taking things personal. Tom and I talked about that many times in police work, how detectives, we take cases personally. When it came to what happened in America, your husband was part of the response, a very significant part of the response to something that happened that was personal to Tom and I. On the 9/11 attacks, we'd lost friends. We responded to it. We were impacted by it tremendously. And very few American wars have been fought or anything because of something that happens on American soil to Americans. It's usually overseas. But that was a deeply personal event. And so we have enormous respect for every man and woman who's ever donned the uniform before and then specifically after in response to that. So that was a very personal thing. And I hope that during the course of he lived in Texas, I understand, and he was in the SEALs. And I hope he understands just how much people like us or anybody who lost anybody that day, um, or even subsequently, those of us who have gotten sick and are dealing with illnesses from it, it just goes on. But wow, I mean, you are so passionate about your story about him. I can only imagine having met him, how incredible it must be as a human being.
You guys, you would have loved him so much. He did know about it being personal. He had a NYPD hat, navy blue with the white, and their fire department hat that he'd wear all the time. And I feel like that's part of who he was. Is he was very observant and he saw people, right? And so he would say, "You guys deploy every day." Right? He deploys for months, but he deploy every day. And to try to live with that was something that he felt very deeply um, connected and appreciative of. Um, and really, I think, I have another friend who was a SEAL and a Ranger and FBI. But he was saying, he felt like he goes, "Hey, it was kind of easier, honestly, to be deployed. I mean, I know we're in the Middle East and everything for 6, 7 months." He goes, "But when I was there, I was focused, I was on mission, I was doing that." And he goes, "Now I'm on mission and focused, and maybe my daughter has a play I gotta get to, maybe my son has a dentist appointment, maybe my wife has a need." It's like that flipping on and off, right? And so that's what you guys, I know, have had to do for so long, and then seeing people in your community who, might hate you for no reason or because were doing your job and put away somebody they know, or it's so complex, and I think he really appreciated the difference and the hypervigilance and the mental, fortitude and compartmentalizing and, all that stuff. He had a great appreciation for what y'all do.
Eh, you know what? We've heard that. Me personally, Dan and I have talked about this, but you hear that from SEALs, Delta guys that, oh, you guys do it every day. And I'm like, dude, I mean, in my mind, no comparison at all. And to hear that from operators like that sends a chill in me. Like, these guys are like, to me, and I've said this forever, Navy SEALs are like, to me, the New York Yankees. That's what they are, in my mind. And for them to turn around and show that respect to us is mind blowing.
Yeah.
And it means more to us than they'll ever know.
Yeah.
And
Well,
that's me. That's a lot of us.
well, I'm glad. I hope you do embrace it and fully receive it too, because the jobs are different, but they have their different turmoil. And I believe, Dan, too, that you will know Chris. And I don't say that lightly. I truly believe in life after death. And I believe that We don't I believe our soul is our soul. So let me tell you, he was so funny. He was a prankster. He would do stuff that is like, oh my God, so risky that and he'd say, well, I knew the guy was either gonna hate me or love me after I pulled that one. But it was like, you know, somebody of like has super high status, that I can tell you about one day what he did, and I was like, "You did what?" And he was like, "Yeah, it was it." And then that guy who's like, you know, very would call him, send him a foul joke or do something just because it was like he let him in, right? He said, "I'm just a normal guy," and the guy was like, "Oh, thank God, let me play, you know, be playful too." And Chris was very, very playful, which um I think that was the thing that my sister noticed the most is that he brought that back to me. I think life kind of was kicking my butt and I was trying to be all grown up and serious and professional. And then it was like just fun. I mean, we'd be at a gas station and it's like, you just see it. You'd see the twinkle in his eye, like those squeegees washing. Well, I looked at him and I thought one of us is going to start it. So I might as well go first. Just flinging the car. We're running the rabbits are at each other, laughing. Just
I
always
love that.
shenanigans and it was, he could take it. It was, my kids and I laugh. We now call me Too Far Taya because like, if I'm gonna play a joke, I usually take it too far. It's fun. Gamble, you know what I mean? And I knew if he wasn't laughing when I went, on a scale of 1 to 10, if I went 5 and he wasn't laughing, if I just went 8 and 9, it'd get crazy enough for him to start finding laugh. And, so yeah, he was really just, a great guy who didn't have anything to prove, and, yeah, I mean, our kids, were definitely robbed of, that, and I we do have conversations about that, and my son has said some really powerful things. I think one of his first posts on Instagram was amazing because I kept them out. I mean, no photographs, nothing of the kids until they were 18 and could decide on their own, and so it was just recent that he did, but he's really, profound person and he's deeply faithful. And he said, I'm a better man uh, because of my father's death. I'm confident in that. Doesn't mean that you wish he had died. You just know that it wrecked you in a way that you came back. And not only wrecked, his little heart, but like he saw me with lawsuits and betrayals and family things. And I mean, man, these kids went through it in ways that are insane. We never could have predicted the the tornado of that hit us after. I mean, from theft and I mean, we've lost most family members from stuff that you're like, this is insane. There's no way this happened. Um, and and I know Chris would be um so proud. And yeah, I'll tell you a story that I think will show you too, like the heart for his children. Oh, he loved them so much. And one time we had this family that Chris and the dad went to high school together, and so they played stupid pranks on each other, and they were just goofy, but, and so our son said something to the kid that was along those veins, like, kind of, ribbing it, like, "Your hair is long and curly," thinking that was what his dad and his friend did, and it hurt the little kid's feelings. And so we told him, we said, "Colton, that really hurt his feelings, and you can't do that," and he was, like, 6 or 7, and we were finishing up the evening with the friends, they went home, and Chris went in to see Colton. Well, we told him that, and he went to his room and just sat on his bed and cried, like, just feeling bad about himself and, like, ashamed of what, he didn't know. Um, and Chris sat with him and comforted him and came back with tears in his eyes. And I said, "Are you okay?" And he's like, "Oh, it's breaking my heart. Break I could see how bad he feels." And it's, and it's not like Colton was sobbing, right? But he had a deeply sad part of him because he's a deeply good person and didn't mean to do something. And that resonated with him, right? Um, and I thought, what a beautiful thing. And my daughter, I mean, I would tell Chris all the time, I'm like, "Do you understand how blessed she is to have you?" And he's like, Maybe not." Like he didn't know a lot of, and I said, girls don't have these kind of relationships with their dads all the time. They don't. I mean, this is the ideal father-daughter thing. She's attached to his hip. He delights in her and he's not spoiling her, right? He holds her to a standard, but I mean, she's always on his leg or in his lap or laying on his chest, and they could just be quiet together. Um, and she would try to make him laugh, not try to make him laugh. Sorry, she'd be funny, and he would laugh, and the rest of us would be like, I don't get it. Like he just got her, you know? Um, and she had some experiences after he died too that are so beautiful that just prove life after death. I mean, she heard things as a child that a child doesn't make up, right? About his love for her and him sort of talking to her and her being like, "He sounds kind of different though. It's not the same voice." Like, is that real? I'm like, "Yeah, it is," you know? Um, and uh it was the one time it was, "I love you, baby girl. I love you." And she was like, "It sounds different." And then she's like, "Can I tell you something else?" And I said, "Yeah." She goes, "I keep trying to make him laugh and he laughs every time, but his laugh sounds different. It sounds kind of different than it." And I was like, "Yeah, hang on to it." And then over the years, and maybe it's another time, but there were things that I had been wondering about, and she would say something to confirm something that she had no knowledge of, but that I had been wondering about. And I was like, oh my god, the Holy Spirit just spoke through her to confirm something for me that I'd been wondering about. So, we've seen a lot of beauty and our faith has grown a lot. My daughter's faith has been challenged at times, which is good because she's had to do the work to figure it out and ask the questions and come out the other side. So, it's been, it's been an absolute storm, and it's also been incredibly blessed with experiences we never should have had. Um, and I will say this too, I continue to think. I just got back this morning from Tennessee, and I continue to think when I'm places, at times, not every time, but a lot of times, wonder what it would be like if Chris was here instead, because it would be better. I mean, if I could be behind the scenes supporting him, watching him do this, like people think they appreciate me, and I'm grateful. But, like, I am, and yet if Chris was here with you guys, it would be a different conversation, right? We're all getting really deep, and you guys would be cracking up and talking about serious stuff, and you'd be doing all the things, and you would love him, and he would love you genuinely, right? Um,
Well, Taya, we are believers. And I firmly believe that Chris is in heaven and God is taking care of him. He's in God's care and he is watching out for you and your children, and they're still his children, and he will always watch out for you. And he will greet you when you cross over and pass over and Jesus meets you, and he will meet you and he will say, "Well done." And he will accept you in, and at that moment you will have peace with your husband, the love of your life, for eternity. That's God's plan, it's God's promise. And he also and remember, he also gives us trials, right? He also always gives us a trial, but he always gives us a way, not out, but a way to deal with it, a way to deal with it. And it's the Holy Spirit coming into our life, and I firmly believe this. He wants us to go through trials to use us for something, right? And so now the work that you're doing, could we transfer quickly to what you're doing now for families, military families who don't have the tools necessarily? You touched on that earlier. What's it like being home when your husband is deployed in the hottest spots in the world, doing the highest level tier 1 operator work at a very risky level? You weren't ready for that, were you?
no, I wasn't, but, and I would say this, there was something I developed when I went from great fear, praying, "God, take the fear from me," and I'd feel and take it for a minute, right? And it's not like it's gone forever, but I'd go, "Okay, you're there." Um, to having my kids and saying, "I've always wanted to be a joyful and patient mom, and I can't be that while I'm terrified." And so I developed it's a long story, but I know we've been talking a lot. So some things happened in the media and I didn't hear from Chris and I was like devastated and starting to freak out. And then I heard from him. And so what I got from that moment was okay. And I adopted it that day and I've kept it ever since. And it's very simple. Until it's me, it's not me, which meant until somebody looks me in the eye and says, your husband is gone, he's dead, then he's alive. That's it. And I lived my life knowing he's alive and he's well. And I do that. And I did it the day he died when we didn't hear from him for a while. I said, until it's me, it's not me. And you know what? It allowed us to live fully and joyfully. And it didn't change the pain when it came, right? I can't prevent these things. So even if it's my kids or somebody that naturally might go, oh, wow, I go, no, like we've done what we can to be safe. And until it's me, it's not me. Like, yes, something could happen to any one of us at any time. But until somebody tells you it happened, it didn't happen to you. So don't borrow it. That's really how I started to cope with that and believe it. Um, it was out of necessity to be a joyful person, and wants that too, right? Nobody wants to know that your job is your wife is miserable. I'm convinced that men feel like a good husband when their wife is happy. Even if they have nothing to do with their wife's happiness, when she's happy, you feel like you're a good man, you know? And and so that's like the women we gotta know that's the gift we give our husbands when we purposely choose joy and find what we need to do to be joyful. They're like, "Thank you, good. Yeah," you know?
Well, really quickly on that, Tom, not to interrupt, I know you wanna say something, but, as men, we know that we really can't be responsible for our wives' happiness, but we know we can make them miserable. We know we can make them unhappy. We may not be able to make them happy all the time, but we know we can make them miserable.
Yeah, and likewise, the reverse is true too, and one of the big things that we talk about too, is culture. This goes for any marriage, but culture suggests that men are supposed to be the buffoons and women are supposed to be, completely opposite. And women are very complex. And there's a beauty in the simplicity sometimes of the way a man can think, right? He can access things clearly. And so appreciating the differences instead of trying to say we all need to be the same, right? And to say, look, the number one thing men need from the time they're little, this is not about I'm a man, I'm married, respect me. No, it's literally I tried it out with my son when he was 12. I did my own experiments. No, a man needs respect more than anything else. And when we learn that it is not about, I'll give you respect when you earn it. This is what I say to women. And most women have said that at some point. It is if a man said to a woman, I'll cherish you when you earn it. Holy crap. You know what I'm saying? And every woman goes, oh my God, I would freak out. I'm like, it's the same thing. Your number one thing is that you want to be cherished. It's not about that. So we do a lot of work with that because it's really, really cool. Once you get the concept, and it's something I wish I knew earlier, is like it's such a blessing and giving a man respect, this is what we talk about. If you're the badass woman he married, when you give him respect, done. He'll slay dragons. He'll do whatever. It's not like he just needs respect from some woman. No, he chose you because you're a badass. And when you give it to him, you're a kingmaker, right? And so it's powerful. It's not as submissive, oh, I respect. It's no, you are a powerhouse and you make your coupledom a freaking powerhouse when you respect him and he does cherish you more because that's what his number one need is being met, just like she respects you more when she feels cherished. So there are some things that I get very fuzzy in a service marriage and very they just get convoluted really easily. And it's very since they have to do a lot of things on their own and you've got a job that's very demanding, it's easy to both disappear into those worlds and just say I tried. So it's extraordinary work that we get to do, and Baylor University studies our programs. We have a 99% success rate, 99.16% success rate. Yeah, over years of doing it. And it's not because we're so great, it's because it's just the tools. Like y'all are service oriented. Your spouses started out that way most likely. So give them the tools and they'll serve each other. And it's like, oh well, okay. I mean, we've got couples like that were on the brink of divorce after 17 years of marriage, and they're, like, on a second honeymoon, and they're double dating with their kids. It's the kids that benefit too, right? It's the next generation. Um, Gosh, we have one in their 50s. Their kids are out of the house, they're cooking in the nude, like, laughing and going, "I can't believe we're doing this, no, we are." And we're saying, like, the walls have come down, the vulnerabilities are gone, the fun is back, the trust is there, and it's like, what a cool thing. And so we help, all law enforcement, first responders, military, active duty, veterans, all. And it builds a community because there's small group for men's, small group for women's, small couples groups, but it all starts first with strength training. So everybody that comes in takes a strengths assessment and then we work from your strengths. So we're not coming in like, tell us what's wrong. We go, okay, these are your strengths. How do you use these in marriage? How have they been sabotaged in your marriage? How can you free them up so that, how can you appreciate your spouse's strengths? And we do it on communication, intimacy, finance, sex, like everything. There's 5 different kinds of intimacy, right? We talk about how you can get those realistically in a busy life, like a service. You can't say have dinner every night at 6. It's not gonna work, right? So how do you do it in that? Um, it's just really it's soul moving work when you see they show up and do the work. And it's just like, I'm in awe. It's so cool.
That's so great. And
Stay with them 2 years, that's important. And we do it online so we can work with schedules.
That's awesome. And you know what? It leads into my next question for you. I watched you on an interview about a week ago. It's an older interview, but I watched it last week. And you got asked a question, and I loved your answer. And I actually wrote it down. I don't write anything down for shows. And I
He only
wrote
learned
this
how to
down
write last week, so,
Yeah,
he's
that's
on the
because,
awesome.
road.
right. And that was with crayons. Now I'm up to pens. Uh, but your answer, the reason I wrote it down is because I loved your answer. And the question was, how do you pray for something when you don't have anything to pray for? And your answer to that was so great. And I'm like, all right, I need to ask her that because of the people you're dealing with now, and maybe not going through similar same situation as you, but similar. And that question, I was like, oh my God, and your answer was great. So I wanted to ask you that here.
Well, I hope I give you the same answer now. I don't know, but
I don't remember what the answer was, so you could say it.
so like great. Now we set up
But it
every
was
this is like on. Is it? No, okay. Well, how do you pray when you don't have anything to pray for? Was your question, right?
right.
No, I do have an answer for that. And the book behind me, Prayers for Bears, it was inspired by this concept where after Chris died, I was telling a friend of mine, I said, I don't, you know, I could earn a living. I chose to be a stay-at-home mom and loved it. It was the greatest blessing of my life. Um, but I said, I don't know about anything. I don't know how anything's gonna work. I don't know how we're gonna keep the house. I don't know, I know nothing at this point. And she goes, well, Taya, you'll always have a roof over your head and food to eat. And I said, I don't know if that's true. And she said, Taya, you will always have a roof over your head and food to eat. It doesn't even have to be your roof, but you have people who love you, and there will be a roof over your head and food to eat. And I went, you know what? You're right. And to this day, the kids and I pray, and we are grateful for, in addition to a multitude of things, the roof over our head and the food to eat. There are people all over the country who don't have that. And then in this book, The Prayers for Bears, Bailey the bear has a rough day. There's nothing, the normal things that Bailey's grateful for are sabotaged by rain and weather. And, in the end, the parents teach the prayer of roof over the head, the food to eat, little bear paws and little bear feet. Because we know in the military, there are a lot of people that have lost their hands and their feet too. If you have them, be grateful. And if you don't have them, what do you have? But gratitude is under appreciated. And I've learned in trauma that it rewires the brain, literally. There are studies that show how much it does in every area. And so you pray. There's also a friend of ours. I don't know if it's common, but it came to him personally. Like he doesn't know if anybody else. But the acronym for pray: praise, repent, ask, yield. Praised is the first thing, right? Thank you, God. I don't care what it is, thank Him for something because He's doing something, and you have no idea what He's stopped that could have happened. Repent, I'm sorry for the things that we all do, stupid stuff, and I didn't even ask for forgiveness for things I don't know I did because I'm sure I did something stupid that I don't realize was as bad as it was. And then ask for something, but then take that moment and pause and yield and go, okay, God does talk back to you, and that's a practiced thing, kind of listening and accepting if He's quiet, and um, but I do think that. Prayer and talking to God is it's changed my life. I found a study Bible that actually works for me. It's lifeprinciples.org, and it's Gene Getz. He's got like QR codes to videos and it's seminary in a box. And I'm like, you know what? It actually does work to be in the Bible. Like, I don't know what it is, but it's alive. It moves something in your spirit, when you're in there reading it, right? Um, so yeah, that's the prayer I think is just thanking God for something and being real with Him, right? I mean, Job was angry with God in the Bible, and he loved Job's prayers because Job was still talking to him.
It's interesting you talk about that acronym PRAY, and, in the men's groups that I'm involved in, we use WAR, which is worship, admit, request, and that's the order it should be in, and we also talk about vertical prayer, which is, I'm not asking for anything, I'm simply praising you, and that pleases God greatly. Praise Him. Imagine you're standing in the presence of the single most impressive human being you've ever met, who's accomplished unbelievable things. You'd be in awe. Well, be in awe of God. Because he's a bajillion times more exciting, interesting, and successful and powerful than anybody you could ever meet. So that's what he wants us to be. It pleases God. then you admit. You admit that you're a broken sinner. Admit that you're flawed. Admit that he made us. He knows us. You're not lying to him when you're acting like you know everything. He knows you don't. And then request. He wants us to ask. Be specific. Ask for the right reasons for the right things, and if it's his will, he will bless you. Maybe not in your time, maybe not in your way, but his ways are different than ours. He will bless you, and he will answer your prayer. And, if you have a belief, you have to believe he's going to answer it. You can't think, God and God, Jesus actually once in the Bible got upset at somebody. "You're asking me if I can heal your son? You know who you're talking to? Course I can heal your son. I made the earth and the moon and the stars and like it was nothing." So that's the attitude we all need to remember is how to pray, right? People forget how to pray, and you waste a lot of time,
They do.
doing it wrong, you know?
Yeah, and what do you do what if you do so a lot of people say, "Well, how do what if you prayed for Chris and he didn't live? Like, where's that? Where's God?" And for me, there's 2 things. One is there's free will of man, and God promises free will, and people will choose bad. Um, and I do believe that the devil has God's given him some power on this earth. I believe that it's, um, actually to show that it's a longer story, but I did not believe in the devil for a long time, by the way. I did not believe in an enemy, and then I asked some people much smarter than me, much more well-read, and I felt like this was something divinely placed on me, and it was the devil challenged God, and God said, "You're free. If you wanna go, go," right? Um, and he was a trusted angel in charge of light and music, which I think is really big because he knows how to hurt us, right? Give us music that sits in our soul that's awful for us. It does something. But anyway, so he leaves and God says, "I'll tell you what I'm going to do. You want to challenge me?" He takes a third of the angels with him and he says, "I'm going to create this earth. I'm going to put my beloved souls on it. And I'm going to show you that I can do good with everything and that good does matter and it does win and that my people will seek me and look for me and find me even without eyes and ears tangibly to see," right? And so the thing that I felt God put on it was a chessboard. And so there's pawns on the chessboard and they're moving. They're you and me and they're people we know. And we go, "Oh my God, they're in check." Like the devil just put them in check. It's over. Like there's no possible way they can get out of this. The game's over. And then God's the master chess player. And so he's like, "Just wait." And it's always checkmate. And I mean, when I'm saying it like a parent, I'm like, "You wanna put my kid in check? Checkmate mode." You know what I mean?
Yeah, yeah.
Oh. And so I'm like, I feel like that's kind of what God does without the cussing. He's like, "Oh yeah, I told you, try as often as you want, and I will bring checkmate every time for my children."
Real quick to follow up on that in the same vein, the book of Revelation is very clear about something, and that thing is this. People seem to think there's gonna be this massive epic battle between good and evil at the end of time, right? No. God's gonna squash Satan without so much as lifting a finger. It's nothing for him to squash him. People seem to think that there's a lot of power struggle going on between the 2. Not at all. God's allowing things to happen, knowing at the end he's gonna crush him. Period.
Yes, and Dan, I'll say this, and I know, Tom, we're carrying on for this, but I do wanna say this. I believe he will only allow the devil to do. I don't think God does anything bad. I don't think he tests us. I think he
No,
trusts
he doesn't.
us, right?
He doesn't
But
tempt us or test us.
he'll only allow the devil to do something he can do good with. And so it may not be like, do I want Chris gone? No. But did God, first of all, God had to do it because it was free will and he keeps his promises in my case. But even if it's illness, he promises he'll do good with it. Will you wait and will you look for what you will do? That doesn't mean he doesn't care. He cries with us. He aches for us. He also knows we're going to see them again and we're going to look back and think this was nothing. But Tom, you and I talked, I know you were interested in this, but when I say free will, sometimes people think the guy who killed Chris had PTSD because that's what everybody said. He didn't. According to the psychiatrist, his own psychiatrist in the murder trial, prosecution and defense said this guy never had trauma in his life. He never saw combat. He did not have PTSD. He was not mentally ill. So, what does that mean, right? It means somebody used their free will to do evil. Why? I don't, there are all kinds of things this guy said later, but there was no, and I actually went to San Quentin with Colton, my son, with a group called God Behind Bars, and I asked one of the guys, and he said, "Taya, if you're ever wondering why, it's a pointless thing. Somebody when they're doing that, they're not in the right mind. Like it doesn't mean they're crazy. They're not in a place that makes sense. You know what I mean? There's not a rational." And so That was very, very hard for me to know that he did not have it. He continued to say it. His family continues to say it, and we couldn't say anything because the trial was coming up, right? And so this narrative got out, and I think for every guy that has PTSD, you don't have to carry the shame of this jackass, you know? I mean, you're not a murderer. Like, that doesn't happen. He chose to do what he chose to do. He had a minuscule, like a second of time. Chris had just fired his last shot on a Old West replica, easy gun. You know, what I mean, there was nothing threatening about this thing. Still had his arm, he's on the shooting deck, still had his arm raised when he was riddled with bullets down the side. It was his sixth shot after he had shot six off the other replica, right? So there's nothing left, there's no bullets, and that's when this cowardly, um, person shot him up and then brutally killed Chad, I think at the exact same time. I mean, if it wasn't the exact same time, there was no in between. I mean, Chad had just turned and it was violent and brutal. And then he went to Taco Bell and then he answered the phone when somebody was trying to get a hold of Chet and was like, "Hey, buddy, you remember me from high school?" And then he goes to his sister's house and says he's getting his dog because he's going to go to Oklahoma because he just sold his soul for a truck. I mean, like he's not insane. An insane person doesn't know there's more to that, and there was more in the murder trial that I didn't know and found out and was like, in my personal opinion, I have no proof of this, but in my opinion, the mom was an incredibly awful enabler, and the two of them just went down an ugly road together. And he got out of a lot of trouble by claiming PTSD. He got out of tons of things, parking ticket or not park, speeding tickets, um, but HIPAA laws. There's a whole bunch of things, right, that happen. But so then I think it's important to come to this place where I say, I want that person to go to heaven because I believe God wants it. I also don't think I have to have anything to do with it. I think God's a lot of people who talk to him. He might be a psychopath for all I know and not have a conscience, and he may not go. I'm not concerned about it. I'm just saying it's not something I can say I actively don't want because then I don't believe that I'm in God's love. And I want to say this too, that do I forgive him? It took me a while to get to the place where I could say, I forgive him for being human, right? He's human, he falls to temptation, or he's a psychopath. I don't know, right? Sociopath. I don't know that. But what I've come to is that of the people who have literally betrayed, stolen, said horrible things, lied about Chris and our marriage, I mean, just stuff that's so insane. And I go, they're human and they're broken, just like I am. And they've chosen to deal with their brokenness a certain way. I can forgive them for being human without saying that the way they're doing it is right. It's like, okay, I can accept that we're flawed and I don't have to have you in my life. I did not know that at first. I didn't know that I could forgive and say, but if your behavior isn't changing, then you can't be in my life, but I'm not going to hold it because it's not mine, right? It's not mine. I can't do anything about it. I've tried. Trust me, if it's me, I've tried. I've tried to help or be a part. And when it doesn't work, it doesn't work.
You know what? Going into this, we knew there was a whole nother side of the story everyone knows from the book and the movie, but not all this. I mean, we've been speechless before. I have with doing all the shows we've done, and this is just another one. Uh, when you're sitting on a screen, sitting in front of you, the person you are, the strong-willed person you are, the mother you are, it's humbling to be a friend of yours now, uh, with what you were able to do. You could have just packed it all up and went, I'm done. I gave it a shot. I found the guy I love. He's the best father in the world. He's gone. I'm out of here. You could have, and you didn't. And you did the exact opposite of becoming even stronger, which is hard to do with the strength that you had to have going through this life. And it is, I'm speechless just being in front of you. Really.
Well, you're very kind. Yeah, I appreciate it. Deanna, I want to hear what you have to say too. I don't want to forget. I wanted to touch on something, but go ahead if you were going to say.
I just was going to piggyback on that and say, it's very obvious that your faith means a lot to you. And it's very obvious that you truly believe that faith carries people through things, and faith has gotten you where you are and will continue to bring you where God wants you to be. And right now, you're turning the tragedy of your beloved husband's tragic death into something positive for military families so that they don't have to deal with some of what you had to deal with and others have. Tom and I are blown away by people who do that, who manage to work through incredibly difficult situations in life and come out of it stronger and help others with it. And I truly believe that's your calling. It
Thank
really
you.
is.
I appreciate that. I will say that I mean, truly, God has given me the right people at the right times. He's surrounded me by people who have lifted me up. I have screamed alone in the car. I've screamed and sobbed. I have been angry. I have wanted to get revenge, and I've had people speaking to me, vengeance isn't yours. And they've talked to me about scripture. They've taught me things. Um, I mean, everything from I didn't know if God, cried as us. I sort of thought he was this stoic being, and I'm realizing that's so not true. Um, and so I appreciate what you're saying. And I also know I could not do it without the people that God is, surrounding me with. And then I've struggled and gosh, I mean, my daughter and I are still coming out of some things where I go, God dang, I missed it with her so many times. I was not the parent she needed so many times. And by the grace of God, he's given us all this time to figure it out and come back together. And we're so incredibly close. And there's been so much pain in between trying to figure it out. But here he is doing it, right? And I feel like he's the guy, like, I used to play basketball, and so I think of it kinda like, this is God. If my kid as a teenager is like, "No way you can shoot a three-pointer, mom." I'm like, "Give me the ball," right? And I feel like that's God all the time, "Give me the ball." Like, "You don't think I can do this, right? You don't think I wanna do this?" Like, and so he's gets all the glory, really. I'm mind blown always with God. He never continues to surprise me because 'cause I'm always like, "That too? Or would he do this? Or does he do that?" And so, oh, and I was gonna tell you it sparked something for me. One of the frustrations my daughter had and a revelation kind of I had, we were coming around a corner, pulling into our house, and we were having a deep conversation, and she said, "You know why it's hard for me to have hope, mom?" And I said, "No, I don't." And she said, "Because look at you." And just she said, "You're such a good person and you try so hard to do good and do right. And look at all that's been happening to you. Why would I have hope that it's going to be any different for me?" And it caught me off guard. And I stopped because, first of all, I don't see myself that way, like as if everything bad. I do know, I logically understand a lot of stupid, crappy, insane stuff has happened. But what happened more importantly, I think, is that I stopped the car and it kind of washed over me. And I looked at her, I said, "Babe, I was made for this. God made me this way for this life. There's a reason that I am the way I am, and it's been a difficult part of my personality sometimes, the defiant part, right? But it's also why I wasn't getting a divorce. By God, we were gonna figure it out, and, so the parts that are hard for us to deal with within ourselves can also be the biggest blessings when we learn what God really intended them for, and, um and it was a powerful thing for me to kind of sit and absorb and realize and say to her, I went, I guess I was, right? And I was made to be refined. Trust me, he's done a lot of refining over the years. So it's not like, oh, I was made for battle and I came out fighting. It was like, no, you were made go into battle and suffer to be broken down, to be rebuilt, to break again. I mean, it's not over. I'm gonna keep learning. But like I guess I was made for that because I continue to love and him and other people and what else what other explanation is it? It's the same reason why you guys can still do this podcast. Everything you've seen and done, it would be easy for you to be like, "I don't wanna hear another story about, the crap that happens in life and the shitty people and the terrorism and domestic terror." You could be like, "I'm done." And no, you're still compelled, you're still driven. That's the way he made you, to talk about it, to bring things out of people, to be curious, you know? It's cool. It's just the way he makes.
Well, anyone who knows the show, me and you had a small conversation about this. Anyone who knows this show and knows me knows the hat I'm wearing now is my favorite. Okay. It's always on me. It's my go to, all that. And the reason it is because of not just Chris, and I got this before we even thought of doing this podcast, before I met you, before anything, is what it stood for. And that's why I like it. And now it's a totally different meaning after you. Now this hat took on a completely different meaning for me. So it means even more. And that's because of you. So thank you.
Well, thank you guys. It's been an honor to talk to you. And it's funny because I'm very curious too. And I'm like, ooh, I need an hour asking the questions of you guys. That would be, we need to turn the tables.
Anytime.
Anytime.
Right.
Absolutely
Anytime.
anytime.
Eh, well, I don't have my own podcast, so I'm either gonna have to turn the tables on your podcast or I'm gonna have to step up and do the podcast that I've been intending to do for years. I don't know. We'll see.
Whatever works for you, we're
We're
in.
happy to share what we've learned along this path, and it's not much, but, hey, if 2 knuckleheads like us can do it, somebody smart like you can do it, that's for
I
sure.
don't know. But we'll see. There's a reason I put it off for a long time too. I'm like, sometimes we just stay in our lane too, you know? See. But
Well, tell us about your book, so our audience can and where to get it and
okay.
what it is.
Okay. Yeah, so Prayers for Bears, the children's book, I actually think, yes, it is for children, but the reason I wrote it was also so that adults who read it and read it to children and grandchildren and that they can be reminded and inspired too of gratitude for the little things because I've needed that before. And so that's my latest one. I did have American Wife that I Jim DeFelice, who put pen to paper for American Sniper, did it for American Wife, and I basically emotionally vomited on him for months, and, it's been out for a while, but if I don't know what it would be probably for people who, I don't know, who are curious about that side of it, I guess, not only with Chris, there's a lot of personal stuff, but just, that living after, hurting and suffering. And then if they go to my website, what I really want, honestly, is if people would go to Instagram or Facebook or my website and sign up for emails because I am not great at that. That's just the truth. That like self promotion, I don't like, but I know that a lot of things in life, like you have a following. So hopefully next year I'll be more consistent with posting. But I have too much to say. How do you simplify it into a little, it's 3 sentences? I don't know. I like a 15-minute post. I don't know. So I'm working on it.
You are an incredibly special person, and we are so honored to now know you the way we are getting to know you, and I hope we stay in touch.
I would love to.
And, we wish you nothing but the best as you move forward in life with your children and your work and your life in general, and we hope it just continues to blossom because you are a very special person, and the world needs you. So thank you.
Thank you guys, man. We're friends now. That's it. So can't get rid of me now.
We have a thing. You took the words out of my mouth because we tell people this all the time. In the NYPD, you're stuck with us. We don't go away. We don't leave.
Once we connect with you, that's it.
That's
That's
it.
it.
Now you get holiday text messages. You get happy birthdays. You get that's it. Uh, and I can't think of a better person to be stuck with than you. So uh, just echoing Danny, thank you so much for being here and your time and your story, which I think is so important to so many people out there who might be going through the same thing and think, like a lot of people, you're not the only one. You're not alone. You're not the first. You're not the last. And you can show people what you can do. Uh, and between American Sniper, American Wife, your new book, it's just Prayers for Bears. You're a special person, like Danny said. So thank you for being here.
Tom, can I
Uh,
say one more thing? I know you're trying to close it now. It just came to me.
no,
Okay. I do want to say this. I feel like it's important and people need to know because the suicide rate is so out of control right now. I want people to know there are times that everybody wants to, I believe there are times everybody wants to escape this life. I believe that's a real thing. And I'm not saying everybody gets suicidal, but I think there are times that everybody just wants, like, I don't, I want out, right? It hurts. And I want to encourage people to say something to somebody. And I really want to encourage people, if somebody says something to you, to not panic, to not freak out, to just say, tell me about it and listen. That's it. Are you safe? Is there any immediate urgency? That's the first thing. If they're safe, there's no immediate urgency. You're not going to do anything. You tell them the truth, which is my life will never be the same with you gone. So you can't do that to me either, right? And then it's just talk to me. And you can decide next if there's next steps, but just people just need to know it's okay to say that because I think that's what eats people up the most is they feel like they want help and they can't say it and nobody will understand. So I do want people to stop doing that because it ruins lives. Um, and it just passes your pain on to somebody else, a multiple somebody else's, right? And I know that's not the intention, but it's the truth. That's what happens. So, okay, sorry, but I was gonna say, yes, we all have pain, so I want people to stop doing that, man, and I want people to be good listeners when somebody feels that way. Don't freak out, just listen.
Great advice.
All right, now you can wrap. You already tried. I'm like, okay, sorry, tell them so. I'm gonna say goodbye, everybody.
Listen, here,
Listen,
you
don't
know,
get us wrong.
you just
We'd stay
mentioned
on with
about
you
having
for
a
3 days.
you just mentioned about having a podcast. The best thing is it's ours. We do what the hell we want. There's there's no one on the other end of anything going, come on, rap. No, no, no. We
No,
do
no,
what the
no,
hell we
no.
want.
Yeah.
Whatever we want.
Oh
Uh,
my gosh.
but
Doesn't pay
again,
much, but it's a good gig. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah, you pay it, but it's fine. No.
To us, it's the people we meet. Honestly, that's why we
Yeah,
do it. It's
I get
it's
it.
fascinating. Like yourself, unbelievable.
Yeah,
Never thought I would ever have a chance to even meet you in passing at a book
yeah,
signing or something. Never mind having this kind of conversation. So
yeah.
this
People
is,
are
I mean,
interesting. Yeah, it's a cool job
ah,
to be able to talk to people. Yeah.
we could do this for 5 hours. Easy. But this is the time of the show that you will appreciate because of your thought process and your mindset. This is the time of the show we pray for all our law enforcement officers and all our military vets and their families. Their families go through it too. It's not a one-dimensional thing. It's them, it's us, it's together, it's family. And everyone out there has to understand what goes into this. It is not easy. Law enforcement, the military, it's extremely hard physically, mentally, emotionally, and the military and law enforcement need everybody's prayers all the time to get through a day, to get through a deployment, to get through life. Just keep them all in your prayers. Please do that. When you see them, say hi, slap them on the back, say thank you, give them a wave. You have no idea. And I say this over and over again. I've said it for over 100 shows now. We can say that now. Uh, you have no idea what a wave does to someone. You don't know the day they're having, and a wave can change a day. Uh, so please do that. Uh, for my partner, Dan Murphy, for an incredible, unforgettable guest, Taya Kyle. This is Tom Smith for Gold Shields. Everyone stay safe. Remember, goldshieldshow.com, YouTube, and every audio channel you can think of. Check us out, hit subscribe, join us on this great ride we're on because you get to hear people like Taya Kyle week after week. So everyone stay safe. We'll see everybody soon.